What's up?
We good? We're talking? We good? No? Okay.
This is the other work? Can we test the other?
Sweet.
And who wrote it? Maybe it's just the audio or something? I have no idea.
Are we good? Alright, welcome everyone to Computer Club. Today we're going to be talking about the career day that we have coming up here. So if you haven't filled out attendance, go ahead and please fill out attendance.thsucomputer.club. Also, if you want to check out our website for additional information, feel free to check out our website as well. So first, if you didn't know, we have the Career Internship Fair coming up this Wednesday. Here's some good tips. Dress professionally if you're going to go. You're going to be talking to potential people who you could be working for, so make sure you look good. Bring some resumes. If you haven't gotten your resume reviewed by Career Services, feel free to do that as well. And if you haven't printed, go ahead and get it printed as well. And then when you go there, obviously talk to people, network with people, get to know as many people as you can. Alright, so we're going to be going over some general internship tips, and then later on you'll hear from several people who had different internships and their experiences and tips for internships as well. So we're going to be going over preparing to be an outstanding candidate, creating your application, standing on your interview, and then crushing your internship.
So, step one in the process from going from no internship to internship is preparing to be an outstanding candidate. It's basically what you can do in your off time to start making it so you have things to put in your resume and talking points for a future interview. So we have two main sections. We have gaining experiences and networking with others. The gaining experiences is stuff that you do outside the classroom, like leadership, like if you do student senate, or there's a lot of different leadership activities. Like there's some clubs that do leadership.
Yeah, so you could, help to be a club officer if you want to look for that in the future. Some clubs or activities also offer volunteer activities. I know CyPro has outreach events they do. Other clubs have volunteer opportunities as well. NanoCon coming up in November, they have opportunities for people to volunteer and help lead that as well. So look for different opportunities on campus, both within activities, clubs, maybe talk to some faculty. This is where the networking portion comes in. Talk to some faculty about ways you can get involved, maybe with projects you can help out with or lead or different things like that.
So for research, DSU has a yearly research topic that you can do. You can propose a research topic. You can usually talk to any faculty member of Beacon College, and they'll probably gladly be your point of contact for that and help you set one up. They were due this last week, but you can start thinking of research proposal for next year. Right now, myself and Nathan Owen and I are doing one about phishing evasion and what the best way is to write a good phishing email. There's also competitions. You can find any style of competition every day of the week. There's defensive, offensive, or CTF based. There's got to be a category out there for you. You just got to look. We mentioned clubs and activities. So networking with others is kind of like going to the career fair, talking to people at booths, figuring out what the company is looking for on personality-wise. Hopefully they learn your name so that way they can reference you. Like, hey, I talked to this guy at this career fair, maybe we should look into hiring him at a future internship.
And also, yeah.
Question, so it might be a bad idea to have terrible things on Twitter and Facebook and all social medias as well with networking.
Yeah.
Not have social media.
Yeah, that's another thing when it comes to preparing. Just don't have social media. No, just make sure be careful what you're posting because potential employers have been known to check social media. Just Google your name, see what they can find online, and
They find all my parkour videos.
sorry, you're not getting hired. Yep, sorry. Yeah, so that's another thing to just keep in mind. Yeah.
Well, some social media is good. Like if you have a GitHub page full of your projects that you do, or different volunteer things you've done on your website and stuff.
Yep.
Those are all examples of positive.
Yep. Or LinkedIn if you're, following or you're in some good networking groups, professional groups, things like that is also good. Alright, and then when it comes to building a great application, depending on what internships you're going for, some have a more intensive application process, some are fairly easy. Usually it's going to include some sort of resume, so like we mentioned earlier, start creating a resume now if you haven't already, and then have it reviewed by different people. So usually on your resume, you want to make sure it's clear and concise. If you have a ton of just text on there, just walls of text, probably not going to be easy to read. Different things you want to highlight is what makes you the best candidate for that position. So I know it's pretty easy to just make a blanket resume, a blanket like application, just toss it out to all different companies. But what you usually want to do is tailor your resume or tailor your application to that specific job position. So if you know this job position is looking specifically for software development or programming, you need to make sure you have those certain keywords or you tailor your application to those things. So that's what you'll want to do. You'll want to research whatever position you're applying for, so that in your resume or in your application you can add position-specific information. And then, like we said, have different career advisors or professionals in the industry review your resume and then give you feedback on it as well. And then another tip we have is just apply. You're not going to get jobs that you don't apply for unless you're just that lucky. So we usually just to maximize your chances, just apply for as many as you can. Don't just like throw a blanket application out there. Like I said, try to tailor them the best you can, but the more applications you have, the more opportunities you have, thus the more offers you have, thus the better internship.
Does that include jobs I'm not qualified for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So even if you don't think you're like, oh, I have no experience in this, usually like the main purpose of internships is so that you can learn. So let's say you're interested in software development, maybe you're a freshman in computer science. That doesn't mean no one's going to want to hire you. People are looking for someone who's willing to learn. So during the preparation phase, we talked about different ways you can get involved and different ways you can build experience. If you show that you're always willing to learn, more programming languages, different things like that, if you show that you take initiative, they're going to want to hire someone who's willing to learn and someone who's willing to take initiative. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can always apply for more. If you don't meet the requirements, they'll just move on. So yeah, always apply for more.
Yeah, I just applied for. I applied for 50 summer internships over last summer, and I managed to get one offer. So I was pretty lucky there. Some people apply for a whole lot more and get less offers. So it just sometimes you just gotta apply to way more than you think, and hopefully you get an offer.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like in that freshman, sophomore level, it takes a ton of offers to, applications to finally get an offer.
Yeah, and it's better to have more options. So if you get, let's say, 10, 15 offers, it's better to have more offers than none, because then you can at least have different options and you can pick whichever one that you like the best.
So how you stand out on your interview? Your chances in an interview are a lot better than your application, so you gotta really fine tune it, because they'll only interview 1% of their candidates, depending on how big their pool is for applications, and interviews narrow down to maybe 25% of the people who are being interviewed, or maybe even 50%, will get an offer. So what you should do first is research the company, kind of learn what they do, because if you don't actually know what they do, that's that, because you apply to 100 different companies, you probably figure out what this specific one does. So you should probably figure out what they do, so that you can ask them specific questions and tailor your stories to their work environment, so you seem better to them, so they'll be more willing to hire you, because they'll be like, oh, this person fits our culture perfectly, maybe we should go with them. You should practice and prepare. Interviews, I've always had the same few questions mixed up in different places. I list here, one of the ones I get most frequently is, tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership skills, or one where it's where you resolved a conflict, and it's always oh, have you ever been in leadership with multiple people, and did they ever have a conflict, and if so, how'd you resolve it? So I always got to go back to a story I have, or and then tailor for the company, so that it's best to have that prepared beforehand, so that way you can be more, so it sounds better when you say it and not just all rambling. For the actual interview, make sure you have your questions set aside beforehand, because they will ask you, hey, so that's all of our questions we have for you. Do you have any for us? And it seems better if you're able to ask them actual questions and not be I'm good, because then it doesn't seem like you care as much, or it doesn't seem like you're as interested. Doing that.
Yeah, so going back to researching the company, if you can provide some real-life examples of how you would fit into the company, that's always a plus. So let's say you've been doing programming, and you notice they have a product, maybe some software development product, something like that. You could be like, oh, I have some software development product, and I could help you improve your XYZ product through some automation or something like that. So if you can provide real-world examples of how you could potentially help that company out, they're going to see that as valuable, not only because you can show how you can use your skills, but also that you did research on the company and you already know a little bit about the company. Thus, they're going to make you seem way more interested than they probably otherwise would have thought of. So. Alright, so crushing your internship. So once you actually land the internship, you're obviously going to want to make sure you do well in your internship. Not only because that obviously looks good to your employers, but once you leave, you're going to probably want recommendation letters for your next internship or your next job. So again, show up on time, ahead of time, make sure you're actually living up to their expectations, if not exceeding them. And then while you're there, make sure you're networking with your peers and your colleagues, because chances are those people that you're working with, whether it's someone your same age, other interns, maybe your supervisors, things like that, you're probably going to run into at least one or two of them later down the road. Also, different bigger companies, they'll have sometimes different departments, so maybe you're doing, again, like a software development position, and maybe there's other like networking departments, like cybersecurity departments. You can interview or job shadow generally with those different departments if the company allows. That way, if you maybe don't feel like the position you're in is an ideal fit, you can kind of like shop around and see what other departments there are to make that better for the next time you have an internship. So make sure you network with not only your peers, but your supervisors and other people as well. And then also take the initiative and collaborate with others. You can make yourself stand out, not only like in your internship as well, but this is going to make you look better when they write that recommendation letter. So take initiative and collaborate with others as much as you can. And then also, obviously, learn new things, because that's what the whole purpose of an internship is. Alright, now we're going to have Nick come up. He is going to talk about his internship with Omnitech and his experience.
Alright, what's up y'all? For those of you who don't know me, I am Nick Hamburg. I am a third-year student studying computer science. I'm the officer for Programming Club, so shameless plug. If you're not going yet, certainly can and should. We meet Wednesdays here at 6 o'clock. But for what I'm actually up here for, my Omnitech internship, so as Annabelle said, I was asked to kind of give a summary of what I got to do this last summer with my internship. So obviously I was at Omnitech. Omnitech is a software development, software engineering company based out of Sioux Falls. They also have an office in Rapid City. So yeah, I'll kind of give you some slides here. These slides were from a recent info session, so if you're at the Omnitech info session last Monday, you'll recognize these slides. I am not this good at graphic design, so I cannot take credit for them. I just copied the slides. So some details that go along with the internship. So along with the internship, I was also provided housing and food. So being in Sioux Falls, Augustana gave us dorm rooms to stay in throughout the summer at Augustana University. So we each had our own room. We got flex money with that too, so we were able to eat right there on campus for supper. And so they had like a Subway style restaurant and then a place very similar to the Q. So that's where we had a lot of our suppers, and that was good. So along with feeding us outside of our internship, we were also fed all the time during the workday. Every day they had what was called lunch and learns, and so during the lunch hour they would have sessions basically like this in their meeting rooms. They would bring in catered food from all different places, Firehouse Subs, trying to think, some barbecue places in Sioux Falls, all like local food places in Sioux Falls. So we never went hungry. There's always snacks, everything there as well. And so yeah, you get paid during the lunch hour to eat and simply learn about something new. And so Omnitech is a very they are very they have consulting and software development focused company, and so they work with clients directly, and so because of that they maintain a business casual dress code, so slacks and a polo or button-up shirt was kind of our casual, and then you would get to wear jeans on Friday. So it was a standard 40-hour internship, and then they also give you the chance to stay in here and work at least 10 hours and continue that internship process throughout the school year and get some extra income on the side while you're studying for classes. So a couple different things that were featured in our internships. We had a book club on Fridays, and we studied a book talking about clean code and really learning how to make code efficient and clean. That way it's like still good in 5 years and not just like a terrible dumpster fire. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. We got to do some professional development workshop, kind of growing our soft skills, and building that team orient. Omni Tech is very team focused, and so I grew very close with all the other fellow interns that I got to be with this past summer. They hire predominantly from here and then School of Mines out in Rapid City. Like I said, the lunch and learns, code-alongs, we got to sit alongside full-time staff and watch them work on stuff that they're working on in the real world with real clients, in the real day-to-day thing. It wasn't some sandboxed thing for us to watch. It was, what they're actually doing. So we got that real-world taste of what it looks like after graduation. We had code reviews as well, so at the end of the day, when we would be finished with our day almost, we'd get to the chance to meet with our mentors, and they would go through our code and kind of help us point out the good things, point out the things that need improvement, and kind of help us learn that way. You can learn so much by reading about things, by doing things, but then doing things and getting feedback on that is a very, very helpful way to learn very quickly kind of what are good practices for writing code. And then mentorship, kind of like I mentioned, we had 2 Sherpas that were kind of our direct mentors, direct leaders telling us kind of the plan, but within the entire office, we were able to approach anyone in that office, and they were very, very welcoming and were willing to drop everything and help us out. It's a very flat organization, so it's not like programmer 1, programmer 2. They only have like the necessary management positions that they need, like owner manager, HR sort of thing, but then everyone else works at the same level. So everyone's working together, nobody's working for each other, which is a really awesome dynamic. So some requirements that they look for, be in your junior or senior year, have that 3.2 GPA. They'd like for you to have a data structures and object-oriented course taken. So any of you who are a computer science major, you'll have to take these at some point, so good to get those taken. And yeah, it's all computer science focused, software development. There isn't really any cybersecurity stuff at Omnitech. So their interview process, Omnitech hires with the intent to bring their interns in full-time once they reach graduation. So because of that, and because of how highly they value their culture, being that flat organization, they go through somewhat lengthy interview process to really make sure they get the right candidates. So your resume, you'll have kind of just a casual interview with them, and then you'll meet fellow members of the Omnitech team in those interviews, and kind of get to ask them questions about what's their day-to-day life like, and then they get the chance to see what you were like, and if they feel like you're a good fit. And so then they'll all get together and kind of vote which candidates did they like the most, and then those will proceed to a technical interview. So I did like a little coding problem in an interview, and they kind of watched and just make sure that I can do like the basic coding stuff and that I can print F and all that, because they don't want to hire someone who can't print F or something. And then at the end they have a logic test, just kind of it's kind of tied in with that tech interview sort of thing, just kind of making sure that they got good candidates coming in. So outside of our day-to-day programming and working and stuff, we got a lot of chances to bond together as an intern group, as I mentioned earlier. So one day during the day we went to an escape room at Escape 605, and just got to spend an hour trying to solve that and get to know each other better. I think that was like our second weekend, so we were still kind of getting to know each other. So that was a really fun way to kind of break that ice. We would have a bunch of picnics throughout the summer as well, so we would take a break from a lunch and learn one day and and set up picnic tables outside, and there'd be cornhole, ladder ball, and a bunch of other stuff, and just a chance to casually talk to people and not have to be focused on work 24/7 sort of thing. So that was really awesome way to get to know the other employees that you weren't around as much per se. And then we also got to do a disc golf tournament. One of our fellow interns is a really, really good disc golfer, and so him and another full-timer kind of put on this disc golf tournament for us interns. So we went to Tut Hill Park in Sioux Falls and did that course there and had a friendly little disc golf competition, and they now have a traveling trophy for that as well. So you have the chance to win that if you get to intern with Omnitech. So I got to experience the first year internship. So basically what we worked in for the most part was the .NET environment, so that's C#, and so that's kind of the Microsoft adopted language and all that stuff. So very similar to C. You'll touch C# if you take object-oriented and stuff, and I'll be honest, I didn't really learn it well in object-oriented, but I was really able to get a full grasp for it, when at Omnitech. So it was broken into 4 phases, that first year internship. The first one we kind of built like a little game just to get our feet wet. So we used HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for that, and just kind of break that ice a little bit. That was really nice for me because I hadn't touched those languages in a while. The second phase kind of tied in that .NET aspect and giving ourselves a back end to the website. So I took that game from the first phase, and then I kept a leaderboard and a high score table for my game in my second phase using the .NET landscape, and then also working with some database stuff, some SQL stuff that I'd never worked with before. So that was really helpful. And then our third phase, we got to actually touch some real client code that was actually out in the workforce at one point in time. So it was this really old legacy code that was quite honestly disgusting. The first week we just spent looking at the code trying to figure out what does it do, and then after that our job was to refactor or clean up the code. So keep the functionality, because the code still worked, but it wasn't, very good. So we had to keep that functionality, but clean up the code so it's much easier to read and fix. So that was a really, really helpful and real-life aspect to really cement those standards of writing good code that I've already noticed this year in classes has helped me a ton. And then that fourth phase, we got to create a new web app that tied in with our third phase where we refactored that code and stuff, and kind of builds the beginning framework of an application that would eventually be used for the real client. So very real and authentic experience that you get to do. It's not just small little dump off tasks, go fetch coffee or that stuff. It's very real, very applicable. And yeah, I often called it a fire hydrant of information throughout the summer for those who are asking me how my internship was, because I continually, new thing after new thing after new thing, just a ton of information presented, and there's no way they're going to be able to retain all of it, but the stuff you do retain will definitely propel you very far forward in your learning path than any semester at college would. So some frequently asked questions that they included here. They provide devices for you, so they have Microsoft Surface tablets, so you get to do all that. You don't have to worry about supplying your own computer. They generally look for 4 to 6 interns during the summer. Then you have that chance to continue in year, show growth, and eventually be hired full-time. You're able to take time off work for family events that you need. They're very family-focused at Omnitech. It's $17 an hour, including the lunch and learns, and then, they cover for housing and meals afterwards, so you'll definitely be making income and profits that summer. Day to day, you arrive at 8 a.m. You'll start out with a stand-up, so you'll kind of talk about what you did that past day, what are things that you learned, what are things that you struggled with, and what you plan to do for that day. So it gives you a chance to check in with your mentors and get everyone on the same page. And then you do a lot of coding, a lot of pair programming, so you get the chance to work alongside with someone and write code together at the same time. So it gives you the chance to not go down the wrong path as quick or sudden, and it really helps you to kind of really think about new aspects and new ideas that you couldn't come up with on your own. And then towards the end of the day, you'll have those code reviews or retrospects where you review your code. And at the end of each phase, you have a retrospect to kind of say what went well, what didn't go well, what are advice that we have for Omnitech to make this phase better next year, because they're very much interested in improving each year and really value our feedback a lot. And then the do I have to sell is kind of because Omnitech works directly with clients and stuff. That's kind of a question brought up, but as interns, you don't have to worry about talking to clients directly. You'll work on real-life code, but it's not like you aren't have your feet to the fire sort of thing. They'll use that and then work with the client directly. So that's kind of all that I have about Omnitech. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask me afterwards, feel free to. I'll stick around, and don't hesitate to come and ask me any questions. Omnitech will be at the career fair this Wednesday, so I highly encourage going and meeting them if you're interested. And even if you're a freshman, don't hesitate to go talk to people. I talked to them as a freshman, even though I wasn't eligible yet, and as a sophomore as well. And even though I wasn't eligible that freshman year, they still remembered me when I came back to my sophomore year, and they remembered who I was and my interest, and that really stood out to them. And so just because you aren't qualified, like they were saying earlier, doesn't mean you shouldn't go and build that network sort of thing, because they'll remember you if you show that interest and that drive. So that's kind of all I've got. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name's Samuel Coom, or Sam. I graduated from DSU about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, and I've been working with this company called CC02 for about 4 years now, as of like a couple days ago. They are a company located out of Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. They're at the end of the Metro line, and so my main idea is just kind of talk about the work that we do so that you can kind of see, one, the work we do in case you're interested in interviewing with us Wednesday at the career fair, as well as just kind of get a general idea of maybe what enterprise networks look like and the direction that networking is moving in the actual industry. If you have questions, feel free to ask. And then another thing too is I'll be giving another info session tomorrow with like a full hour-long period, and it will be slightly different slides. So if you want to come to that as well, if you thought this was interesting, feel free. We'll continue forward with this. We're an engineering consultancy firm based out of the Washington, D.C. area. So that basically means we come into environments and clean them up and make them better. That's why we were brought in. We do services on large networks, and, anything from architecture, design, deployment, to automation, orchestration, performance engineering and management, and then security, analysis, and response. We're in both government and commercial spaces. The focus of this talk is kind of more considered to the work that I did while I've been at CC02. And it's generally around network automation and the consulting for a brownfield enterprise environment. And I'll tell you what that is in a second if you don't know. I'm not going to go in depth into any specific tools, but more so to the general ideas. And I'm going to skip over probably a lot of what we do, such as like network discovery and diagramming, documentation, things like that, as well as perhaps more of the security side of things, because I'm more on the network and automation side. But at the career fair, we'll have two guys who do more security things. I think they deal a lot with Splunk, so if you want to talk to them, you can come find us. So the difference between what brownfield and greenfield is, greenfield is the dream. It's basically, it's a fresh network. There's nothing that exists. You get to pick out all the equipment, and you can have all the same hardware and software, and everything works, and it's very nice and easy to use. Brownfield is generally why we're brought in, and this is, you're coming into an environment that's existed. It's grown maybe over 20 years from different sub-organizations, each one doing their own thing, nobody following any type of standard, and it's pretty much a mess, is the general idea. So to give you an example, is one of them we came into, it's about 1,000 network devices spread across the entire U.S. from coast to coast, and just of those 1,000 plus, 800 of them are about Cisco iOS, so that's pretty, consolidates a lot of it to a standard, but within that you have 80 different hardware models, which is quite high variance, and then from hardware with the OS that's on those, right, if you have 80 different hardware models, you should have 80 different OSs, right, to match. But instead, there's 200 unique pairings within the hardware to the OS. And then licensing is another thing as well, which I won't go into because that adds a little bit more diversity. So you can see there's a lot of variance when you come into these. So the first thing that we do generally in entering these environments is you come up with standards. Standards are good because they allow you to then have a comprehensible view of the network. Basically, what is this network supposed to do? What's it supposed to look like, right? So if you know how it's supposed to work and it's not working, you can review, how does it deviate from the standard and then adjust. And it gives you a consistent platform to build upon, because you're going to get some novelty always. A lot of clients like to think their networks are kind of like unique snowflakes, but generally it's like 80% the same as every other network, and then you have a little bit of novelty in there. So this also, with the standards, allows for best practices in security, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. Being DSU students, is security is a good thing, and if you have standards and follow them, then you should be in pretty good case. When they're not followed is generally where things can go wrong. So you can have different kinds of standards. So configuration standardization is one of them. So this is same configurations across the board, right? Most switches are all going to be the same. Routers are going to be pretty similar, and should basically follow the same configs. It makes it really easy to comprehend, because you log into a site in one city versus another city versus a different state, another state, right? All of the sites should be pretty similar, Like, it makes it easy to comprehend it, versus you log into one and you're like, I have no idea why this line is here, this line of configuration, and then you remove it and it brings the whole thing down. Then you're on maybe a troubleshooting call for an hour or two trying to get somebody on site to console you in. So comprehensibility is one of the main reasons standards are really nice. You can look at what's there and understand it. And less error prone. All the vetting has been done on the configuration beforehand, so you don't have to worry about, is this the best way to configure? You don't have to look it up and try to, read, is this what I should be doing? Am I missing something? Should I be adding this? If you try to add it in a live environment, then maybe it breaks something and it doesn't go so well. So when it's pre-vetted, it's fine. You can just push it and not care, right? Another one is hardware and software standards. So configuration is one thing, right, what you actually tell the device to do. The other one is the actual hardware, or then the software that runs on top of it. It ensures a consistent platform and support across the network, so if something breaks, you can get support for it, update the software, vulnerabilities, you can update those, rather than having kind of a crapshoot of, 200 plus, variation between hardware to OS. If one's vulnerable, then you have to figure out which ones are all vulnerable under that, and then get those all up. If they're all the same, right? If it's vulnerable, it's the same on all of them. You push out the new image to all, update, you're done. Software should be determined based off of vendor recommendations, right? Once again, takes the burden off of you, and then whenever an update comes out, they'll let you know. And hardware should be determined based off of like site size or something like that, right? You don't need something really powerful for a small site of like 10 folk. So, in regards to configurations, the way you can push the configurations for these standards, you have a couple different options. Each one kind of evolves from the last one listed here. So CLI is kind of just, you log in through SSH, call it cowboy style, because you're just kind of shooting from the hip, and you're hoping that it kind of works, so you're doing like a copy, paste, and pray. So the idea here is there's no staging area. So if you use Cisco iOS, right, that's how that works. You enter the command and it's live instantly. Juniper actually has like a staging area where you can review what are all the changes I've prepared and then commit them. So that's kind of nice. Another thing too, CLI doesn't have any rollback, so if you push the configuration and something breaks, hopefully not your connection to the device, so you can at least roll it back. But then you have to go and you have to figure out which exact lines to move back, whereas if you have a rollback file, right, you can just say roll it back and flip back all the configuration to what it was before. So CLI doesn't have any of that, obviously. Templates, think of that kind of like Mad Libs, where you fill in the blanks. And that makes it a lot easier because that's at least you have standardized configuration then, and then based off of the uniqueness of the site, like IP subnets, things like that, you fill it in and you push. DevOps is getting a bit more advanced. You can get some OS abstraction, so if it's like Cisco versus Juniper versus Arista, something like that, and you should be able to then push this configuration to them no matter the OS, if that's what you'd like to be able to do. So this has some programmability as well to pull information and then auto-fill in those values in the Madlib templates rather than you having to look them up and fill them in. And the fourth one is model-based orchestration. So it's very similar to DevOps. The main difference is you have a local model, a database basically, of the devices that you can then reference. So we're doing the fourth one right now, one of our clients. So then applying those standards, right, like what are some standards you might apply and why would they be good aside from just being consistent, right? So some of those are doing time zones. So if you have a device in New York and another one in San Francisco, and they're sending logs to a log server and you're investigating one, and then 5 minutes later you're investigating the other one, and you have to do the difference of 4 hours of time difference. That's pretty annoying. Then you have to keep remembering which one's where. If you just switch them to all UTC, it's all going to be consistent, and you can just compare any logs, and it's going to be easy. Similar with NTP, if they all take from the same time source, they're all going to be consistent all the time. Whereas if they take from different time sources, they can vary by 2 or 3 seconds. So if you're comparing events and they're a couple seconds off, it might not immediately lead you to figure out what happened. So that's another one that's very good. Ensure that logs are actually being sent to your servers. SNMP, which is Simple Network Management Protocol, so that's basically gathering information from your devices so that people in your incident response can review those and then alert you when things are wrong. And so just having all that information pre-prepped and you just push it with just small parameter filling makes it a lot easier, and you can continuously verify that all of your devices are actually being tracked when you have a large number, such as 1,000 plus 10,000 or however many you have. As well as for security, right, like version 3 version 2C. And then NetFlow, this allows you to just basically track the flow of data through your network, and also, too, if I'm saying a lot of things and you haven't heard some of them before, that's okay. Don't worry. I know that you are all students. If you think about it, you'll probably be at school here for 4 years. I've been working here for 4 years. You go to class for probably like a couple hours a day and then study, like maybe a couple hours a day, maybe, right? Maybe a bit more for others. But here, it's 40 hours a week. So it's like the same amount of time, but more time invested and condensed. And then if you ever learn something right and then like 6 months later you're like, oh, I understand it now and I don't know why, it's because you had like time to process it in the background. So I've had like all that time in school plus this, so it's, so like the guy who was presenting before me said, you get kind of the fire hose. After you've been in it for 4 years, all that fire hose starts to organize and make more sense. But the first couple months it's just kind of like, so I'm kind of fire hosing you right now, but I think it's pretty interesting. So with standards defined too, it's easy as pie to bring on a new device or appliance. So if they're switching to a new logging server or a new like SNMP management server, a new incident response server, something like that, and you need to change all that configuration across all 1,000 devices. At least in the place we're at now, they used to log into each device one at a time and then go and change the SNMP server address that it's sent to, and then you have to verify that that's working. With automation, you just say change it across all of them at once. Print out any of the ones where, like, for some reason maybe a connection error failed or like the config failed or something like that. You maybe have 15 devices you manually troubleshoot instead of 1,000. So it's going to save you a lot of time from doing tedious work you don't want to do. So automation, what I was just saying. What do you want from an automation solution? So mass communication is the main thing, right? You want to be able to talk to all of your devices at once. Whether it's operational, so pulling information, who are the neighborships, right? For this is either CDP or LLDP, like what switches are connected to which switches, which MAC addresses are there. If people are having phones that aren't coming up, you can easily locate it. Because sometimes people will just say, like, hey, this phone isn't coming up, but they don't tell you where they're at. Or you have a general area, but they don't know what port is plugged into the switch because they have no idea. So you can just say, all the switches at the site, check for this MAC address, and it's like, okay, now I found it's plugged into this port and I can troubleshoot it. Instead of logging into each switch one at a time and then running the same command copy-paste onto each one. And some of these sites have 20 plus switches, so it'd be really annoying. So yeah, so that's one thing is like for operational, and then the other one is for configuration, right? If you want to, like I was saying before, push out a mask change for maybe SNMP or a logging server or anything like that to your devices. You obviously want safety features, because if you can touch all of your devices at once, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot really bad when you touch all of your devices at once. Because you can make things very standard and good all at once, or you can also bring everything down at the same time, which is terrible. You want speed as well, because we're humans, we don't want to sit and wait forever. And then you need manual override, because most of the time it's all going to be consistent and similar and the same, right? So it should work for that, but you also need manual override for those novel cases where automation just can't handle it, or whatever program the person wrote can't handle it. So some of that would be like you have a service, which is basically just an implementation of a standard. So you have a standard for SNMP or syslogging. You just say that's a service and you push that out, similar to a template, but you can keep like a lifetime of it. So you can always check like, is this in sync? Is the configuration still there? And then if not, then you can just do a quick redeploy or push to that configuration. Pulling information as well, like if you want the source interface to always be set to the management interface, you can just pull that information. That's kind of like the DevOps I was talking about, instead of you filling it in manually. And so it limits the amount of time that you have to spend looking things up and then filling in forms, basically. I'm not going to go through all of this. Another one too is because of the diversity, configuration support isn't standard across all of them. So certain commands are hardware dependent, certain are software dependent, others are license dependent. So one of them is like NTP update calendar. It's only accepted on certain hardware boards. So if you just want to push it out to all the devices, it fails. And if you have the safety mechanism where if the commands being pushed out fail, you want to roll all of them back. This is the idea of if you've taken a database class, they have ACID transactions. The A is atomic, so it's all or nothing basically, right? So you don't want a partial configuration push. You want the whole thing there or none of it. So then you know what state it's in. You don't want to be ever confused of what state it's in because only partial configuration was pushed. So you need to know which configuration is supported. So one of the things we can do is we can just query all the devices and basically ask them, do you support this command? If you use Cisco, you basically put the question mark at the end if it says it's supported or unknown. And then we can just take that information and store it in a database. And then whenever we go to push these configurations, you look in that database, see if it's supported. If it is, you push it. If it isn't, you skip it. So things like that. And the manual override for things where we've had devices lie to us in multiple ways. One where it says it's supported and then you push the configuration and it's not accepted. And other ones where it says it doesn't support the configuration but we pushed it anyways, and then it said we'll accept it but it's it's deprecated, please don't use it. So it's very annoying. The devices will say they support things they don't and then say they will for things vice versa. So you need the manual override for those things because a lot of these devices weren't built with automation in mind. So when you try to quickly map things, you'll sometimes get false positives or false negatives. Other things you can do too is like most people have phones in their offices and those are connected through voice over IP. A lot of times they'll have sites they'll ship new phones to, and before the person was scanning every single phone one at a time and then matching that MAC address that they scanned to a person's name. Instead, all the configuration is already written in the device, and you can figure out what MAC address is there because it's written there, and then you can just look up which port on the switch it's on, and then you can just map it all there, and then you can have them plug in the new phone, do the exact same thing, and just say, oh, now that port has this new MAC address, so that's the new phone, so that's this person's new phone. So doing some like scripting like this, it's not highly complex either. It's not like you don't have to do any object-oriented programming for this. This is just kind of I run a command on a device from the output. I put in a CSV file, I run another one, I update it, and then store that, and then when they plug in the new phone, I just rerun the script and update it with the new one, and now you know. So some basic scripting can go a long way to save you an hour of scanning 50 phones versus 5 minutes of run the script, plug in your new device, run the script, and now all 50 are updated. So it can be very beneficial to invest that time of how to do something more efficiently. Even like it's not really automation, but just simple Linux commands like grep and awk and tr and sed and things like this. It's very interesting. A lot of people in network engineering don't know these commands for some reason, and they like try to parse through like these big Excel sheets and waste a lot of time. And instead, you can just grab everything in 3 seconds if you know basic Linux commands. So that'll save you a lot of time as well. Highly recommend learning some basic Linux. Yeah, so some of the lessons learned from kind of at least going through network automation is the planning and organization is huge, just because the thing you're dealing with is highly diverse and is just a big mess, kind of. And whatever your solution is probably not going to work, so plan for failure. That's one of the big things in security as well, too, right, is a lot of the ways people get into your systems is because, you know, if they provided proper input, everything works perfectly fine, but if they provide bad input, maybe you don't fail correctly, and then they can own your system or dump your database. So sanitizing inputs for SQL injection, things like that. But yeah, so your solution probably isn't going to work too, because in my case, the existing environment was so diverse that anytime we try to do automation over it, there'd always be one or two devices that didn't like it. So plan for failure, and then if you can fail well, you'll do really well. Good foundation is based off of defined standards. That'll really help you deal with differing situations pretty well. And you should cover most of them. Like, some will be unique, but it will cover most. And then ensuring, that your automation solution is flexible. The old network devices you're inheriting were not built with automation in mind. They don't have APIs. New ones, they're trying to build stuff like that. They're using like NetConf and Yang for a way of interacting with these devices. Some of them use REST. But yeah, a lot of the old ones don't have any type of communication interface. So it's, and then automate anything repeatable, because it's once you do it every single day for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for a couple of years, you start to really dislike certain things. And so if you can automate that away, it just makes your day a lot better. And maybe enjoy chatting with somebody or having a coffee a bit more instead of drudging through scanning 50, 100 phones. So I don't know. Some people like to do that. I won't lie. I've met some people who enjoy doing that. But that's my 2 cents. So my advice, at least from what I've seen, if you're interested in computer networks, right, and if you're interested in security, that's also computer networks, right, because you have the firewalls, you need to collect the net flow and information to know what's going through your network, you have identity posture assessment, things like that. It's all related. But the future of networks and obviously security in that instance will require some type of programming. I think that's going to be a bigger and bigger thing as it moves along. Currently, a lot of network engineers don't have too much programming skills or ability, so if you do and you're interested in it, similar for network and security, it's going to be a really nice foot in the door. And you don't need to know like object-oriented. Once again, big plus if you do, because you can do a lot more with it. But some simple Python scripting, understanding Linux commands and how those can interact is going to be a huge plus. ISPs and large enterprises are all trying to move to some type of software-defined networking technology, whole thing of infrastructure as a service. They're all looking for automation and orchestration. It's the way a lot of them are moving. Some of them are still on older stuff where it's not that. And then there's a whole breadth or spread of it, right, where some, if you get all within the same vendor, they'll give you something to deal with that. Others, you have multi-vendor and you need a more complex, expensive tool. And it kind of works for multi-vendor, but not really. Things like that. Many vendors are trying to make their GUIs have easier use for like doing visual programming, where you like have like a box and you drag it here, and then there's like a circle where it's like an if statement, and you can branch off this way or this way. So they are trying to make it more user-friendly to people who aren't programming, but actually understanding how it works in the background is going to pay off dividends. So once again, how do you recommend at least being able to kind of think in that sense? And a simple understanding of Python will help Linux command line tools like sedoc, grep, sort, unique, and tr. If you have Linux, right, you just type man and then that word and you can read it, and then if you just have like a big CSV file, that'd be the best way to work on it, and then just try some of those on it. It's highly useful. And that's the presentation. Sorry if I kind of talked a little quickly. I was just like zooming down the interstate to get here because I was working in Sioux Falls, and then I was trying to just get here as quick as possible. So, are there any questions? And if you don't want to ask a question aloud and you want to find me after, feel free. And then, like I said, I'll be having another presentation with slightly different sides tomorrow, and that will be in Mad Labs room 112 at 4 o'clock. There will be pizza and soda if you also like to eat or drink.
Howdy, I'm Austin King. I was an MSS intern at IBM last summer. MSS stands for, I think, Managed Security Services. So what I did for my internship is I had 2 projects that I was assigned to at the start of the semester that I worked on the entire time. So they kind of give you like a list of like 15 different projects, and you kind of select your top 5 or whatever. And there's 8 other interns in this group, and they kind of just use that ranking to see what is it like. You get your first choice hopefully, and maybe your second or third, depending on how popular the different choices are. I ended up with my first one and then my third or fourth choice down the list, which were both dealing with Ansible. One was automating vSphere deployment for users, and one was hopefully that would one day go into prod for IBM. It was starting the scripting of deploying SOCs. So I can't remember what SOC stand for. Yeah, Security Operations Center. So my job was to start like the process and build out the framework, whatever, for making IBM's first scripts for auto-deploying SOC. So mine were Ansible scripts that were auto-deploying Ansible Tower. So the Ansible Tower is like a GUI for Ansible, which is just like the first thing that all these SOCs needed. That's what they wanted from me. They weren't the fastest when it came to replying or like, hey, what next steps, and I wasn't that good at taking initiative at what I needed to do next, which is one of the kind of things I learned over the summer is kind of extrapolate what they want from the end goal and just kind of guess and then ask for feedback later on if they don't have anything else. So IBM has this learning platform that they have available to all interns for the summer, and I see the top line of some of the topics that it has. Those are the ones that I did, but there are significantly many more of different, there's like hours and hours of leadership, different presentations you can watch. You can learn probably any topic you'd ever want to learn in this list. Sadly, my summer was online. Hopefully next summer was in person, but because of COVID, they didn't want to bring everybody back to the office quite yet. Juniors, I got paid $25 an hour, and if it's in person, there's a possibility that you can just skip a few days of work one day and go to Disney World. So I mean, that's not a good reason to go work at IBM. I don't know what is. Does anyone have any questions?
Did you go to Disney World?
I did not, because it was online. Alright, so if you guys want reach out to me, you can, I'm on Slack at Austin King, so let me know. If you also want any reference, hit me up and I'll tell them about you, and it might help your chances.